Can everyone hear me? Let's see if this works now. And gonna get that chat up and running. John can hear me, that's good. Is the audio coming through all right? After the disaster of last stream, I have experimented extensively, changed a bunch of settings, and now we have a nice little chat overlay as well, so that's good. So hopefully everyone can see and hear and there's no buffering problems, and I'm just crossing my fingers that everything is working properly. Audio is good, that's good to hear. Okay, well hello everyone. Welcome back John, welcome back Puzzleheaded. Welcome back Kate is Kate and Saucy Pup. And hello Skellyman and Vacuous Zealot. I can't remember if you've been here before. If you haven't, then welcome. And if you have, then apologies for not remembering and welcome back. Hello, what's new, boys? On Lustra. Okay. Hello, Ego Border. Glad you could make it live as well. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna answer every question. Whoa, okay, now the chat's going. Are we, is that working all right? Okay, I'm just hoping that everything is working. Oh, thank you for the super chat, Ethan. Glad you are playing DS1. Fantastic game. Yeah, it really is fantastic. I actually just started another playthrough on it, because I haven't played it in a while. So last time we were talking about Destined Death. And you know, I had a bunch of different things that I wanted to cover, and then I eventually had to kind of speed up things at the end because I was getting so bogged down with chat. Peace Walker, no, I don't believe you're shadow banned. I can see your comments. So, hold on, let me just adjust something here. Okay, now I can see the chat a little bit better. So, instead of getting bogged down with that stuff, I just wanted to start with one big question, and then I figure that's going to kind of just lead into a bunch of other things. So, I'm going to do that. And this is kind of a preview of my next video, since it's going to explore the same thing. So let me bring that up really quickly. Where is it? It's here. Okay. Can everyone see this? I'm using Streamlabs now rather than OBS, so it's rather than just the base OBS. So there's a few different settings I'm still getting used to. So let's take a look at this. The big question. Yeah. Good, good, visible and readable. I love to hear it. So this is basically going to be the format for my next video. And by the way, anyone who wants to look at this document and also comment in it, the description should be, or rather the link should be in the description for this stream. And I'll just post it in the chat just in case. So if anyone wants to open that up at the same time, I'm just, you know, to follow along, or if they want to make comments as we go along. So here's where I'm starting from. Elden Ring is very confusing. Oh, okay. Someone, Peace Walker asks, before we begin, can I ask something to see what you think? Sure. I'm all ears. John noticed that the branches on the bald monk statue look like the helpin stick sword things that the Deathbirds use. Yes, and I in fact I mentioned this in my most recent video, the structure of reality. Every problem, Vacuous Zealot says, every problem in the lands between is because nothing can die. Well, that's debatable, and we're going to get to that. So, Peace Walker, if you want to ask what you're going to ask, just post it in the chat, and I'll get to it. But let me just lay out the way this is going to go. So, oh, what's up, Last Protagonist? Nice to see you in the chat. I think the biggest problem in the lands between is that flies keep getting into the ointment. Yep, that is the monkey in the wrench. Why is poop gold? Yeah, that's a good question. So, okay, here's the structure of what I'm going to lay out, and this is basically going to be the structure for my next video, but I'm kind of, let's say, prototyping it now to see where, I don't know, just to kind of get my thoughts out there, because it's easier to talk about than it is to write about. So I figure if I talk about it first, then maybe I'll have clearer thoughts, and you guys can kind of inform what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So the big question is identity. So, and this is a question, so first of all, there's clearly a theme of weirdness around identity, you know, so you have all these people with aliases. Okay, actually, let me start with an anecdote. So, back before Elden Ring, there was a time before Elden Ring, and that time was occupied with Dark Souls 3, which is, I would say, nearly equally as confusing. And so I started to get really into the lore. Probably not as deep as Elden Ring, but I was into it. And I was convinced, I won't, for people who haven't played Dark Souls 3, I won't spoil anything major here, but I was convinced that Rosaria, there's a character named Rosaria, I was convinced that Rosaria was actually Guinevere from Dark Souls 1. And there was different reasons for thinking that. Some of it was thematic and aesthetic, and some of it was the actual mechanics of it. But anyway, I was pretty convinced of this. And then someone brought up a really good point, which was that at no other point in Dark Souls was anybody else given an alias. Was anybody else, secretly another character? That was never a thing in the way that the Dark Souls, I guess you could argue maybe with some of Dark Souls 2. That's a whole can of worms. But basically, that made me really reconsider, because no matter what the actual evidence is in the game, if your theory requires something that's narratively unique, narratively exceptional, in terms of the way that the story is being told, so something like that, like having a character be another character, that really brings a lot of doubt, I think, to the theory. And actually, even before that, there was the whole deal with Solaire. Everybody in Dark Souls 1 thought that Solaire was Gwyn's son. And I mean, this was a really popular theory. A lot of people believed it. There were, I would say, some good reasons for thinking so. I don't think I ever really bought it. And then that was proven to be false. So the thing is, imagining that one character is another character is, first of all, fairly unusual. Um, most stories don't do that kind of narrative technique. Um, but it is very appealing because it does two things. First of all, it simplifies the story because it means that now, everything that you thought about character A, you can explain by referencing character B, and everything that you thought about character B, you can explain by referencing character A. So it simplifies things, so that makes it attractive. And also it offers this sense of like, there's this secret layer to the story that I've uncovered. So it's I get to say that I discovered this secret thing, the hidden meaning. So that's sort of the backdrop. Now the thing is, once you come to Elden Ring, this is clearly a different situation. It is not like Dark Souls. We have so many examples of on different levels of something going on with identity. People have aliases. So Ronnie calls herself Rena, Morgott calls himself Margit, Horalu calls himself Godfrey, Malekith calls himself Gurrank, right? So people have multiple names. And then there's the more weird stuff, like Radigan is Marika, right? Or Mikola and Saint Trina, and Godefroy. And there's all of these examples with identity being confused in some way. So I wanted to pull up, let me look. How do I look this up? Okay, fine. This should be fine. So this is the basic oh, this is a video. Okay, so this is basically it. This is the very fundamental basis for all logic, right? So there's three laws. So the first one is the law of identity, which is basically A equals A, that something is itself. If you make a proposition, you are proposing the thing that you're proposing. I mean, in a way, this is so fundamental that it's kind of hard to think about because it's so basic, everybody just takes it for granted. Like, yeah, obviously a thing is itself, right? And then we have the law of non-contradiction. So if you say, what would be an example of this? Okay, we take the conjecture, there are kangaroos in Australia, right? So that conjecture is itself, and the law of non-contradiction says it's not its opposite, right? So if you say there are kangaroos in Australia, that is not the same thing as saying there are not kangaroos in Australia. Those two are different statements. Again, this is so basic and fundamental that it's sort of like, yeah, well, duh. And then the law of the excluded middle, which is that things must be or not be. So either there are kangaroos in Australia or there aren't kangaroos in Australia. There's no middle ground there, right? It's either true or it's false. It's not, there's nothing in between. So these are the basic, I mean, this is like the absolute fundamental place that you begin any conjecture, any way of looking at the world. You have to assume that these things are true. So when we come to Elden Ring, the problem is that these seem to be flexible. And you could look at that in two different ways. One way you can look at it is that, well, we've got something in the story which affects reality, right? The Elden Ring. I mean, just to put it in simple terms, I think there's more nuance here, but just to put it in simple terms, the Elden Ring governs the laws of reality, let's say. And so if you if you start from there, it's like, okay, well, what's the scope of that? Can you actually govern the laws of logic itself? And those three rules, identity and non-contradiction, is it possible for A to not equal A, or for A to equal the opposite of A? Um, so that's sort of up in the air. And then we have all these things with, Radigan is America. They're clearly two different people in one sense, in the sense that they have different motivations, that they're, male and female, that they they're presented as being two different people in some sense. I mean, America actually talks to him. Um, she says, Leal Hound of the Golden Order. Let me just find it here. O Radigan, right? So this is America's own words. O Radigan, Leal Hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me. Thou art yet to become a god. So it's like, okay, they're different people, but then he's her other self. And so this is why Elden Ring is this is essentially why Elden Ring is so confusing. Is because this basic these basic laws of logic are being, let's not say that they're being contradicted. Let's say that they're ambiguous, or it's unclear exactly how they're working. Now, I don't think that it's just the it, I don't think that you can excuse it by saying, well, okay, well, logic is out the window, so we just all throw up our hands and say that that's the end of it. I think there clearly is some reasoning going on. I mean, there's a reason that this situation with Radigan and America exists. There's a reason that these strange things with identity are the way that they are, and and it's a narrative reason. It's a reason in the story. So the question is, okay, how do we kind of clear away the noise? Because if you can't rely on these basic things, that like a person is themselves and not someone else, that adds a lot of noise to what you're looking at. And it's hard to find the signal there to see, okay, why is this person another person? What exactly is mechanically is going on there? What are the conditions for identity to be um, merged or to become ambiguous? So this is the big question as far as I see it. Like, what is the reason for the world being this way? So that's where we're going to start. Let me quickly read some things in chat, because you guys are posting a lot. So let me pull back up here and see what you guys are saying. Yeah, there's a lot of questions you guys are bringing up, which we can come to in a little bit. I'd rather keep it a little bit more focused to begin with, and then things like why there's already mounds of ash in Lindell. We can branch out like a tree. We'll branch out as we go on, but I want to start with the sort of focus, just so I don't get pulled too much off track. Oh, so Peace Walker, this looks like this was the thing you wanted to ask me. I think Bloodstar and Formless Mama is the same entity. Fire monk slash dead giant totem pole slash spear thing is a 5-pronged spear like Moog's. Are you referring to those like those giant thorn swords? Because they have the five fingers reaching upwards, the sort of 5 branched thorns reaching upwards at the top. Yeah, my inclination at the moment, and when I say this, I don't have any real confidence in this, but my inclination is to say that the Bloodstar, the Formless Mother, Frenzy, and the Crucible are all tightly related. And whether they're the same thing or not is kind of gets into this question of identity. Like, what exactly is the same? Because there's lots of things in the narrative that are, if you were to draw like Venn diagrams of all the concepts, it's like everything kind of overlaps, 70% with something else. And so everything is just this muddled mess of like, well, it's a bit like that, but it's not quite. So Oh, welcome, Elden enthusiast. Can't speak. And welcome back, Cola RPG. There's a second comment you made that clarifies things a bit. Did I miss it? Oh, the bloody star you worship by literal blind faith or taking its blood/life energy to power yourself is the only difference. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I mean, I think it would be silly to say that there's absolutely no relationship between the blood star and the Formless Mother. If you just take the name, the Formless Mother, the implication is that the mother is herself it's almost as if she is blood, because Moog stabs his spear into the body of the Formless Mother, I think it says. Or you thrust an arm into the body of the Formless Mother. And what actually happens there is there's like a swirling vortex of blood which appears. So if that's the body of the Formless Mother, then maybe the Formless Mother is blood. That would explain why she's formless. So does that connect to the Bloodstar? Clearly there is some connection there. And Cola RPG points out formless in this game doesn't mean non-physical. Yeah, if I'm correct, maybe Last Protagonist could probably remind me of this. I think that the word formless, I don't remember the Japanese, but it's formless in the sense of, like, in the way that a liquid is formless. It doesn't have a sort of structure to it. So that would kind of line up with the idea that she is blood, or she's made of blood. But clearly there is some connection there. But the problem is, it's not enough when you get to this with Elden Ring having such weird things going on with identity. It's not enough to say, oh well, this is connected to that, and therefore they are the same thing or they operate on the same principles, because things can be so close to each other and yet still be different in some ways. So okay, so anyway, this is the big question that I want to address. So the first thing that we could ask is there one reason for this or several? In other words, when we look at all these weird things going on with identity. When we look at uh, America and Radigan, Mikola and Saint Trina, um, the perhaps the Morgott and Moog illusions, perhaps the D twins, Darian and Devon, having one soul but two minds and two bodies. When we look at the Round Table Hold, having multiple versions of itself. When we look at the Everjails, Godefroy, the spirits of Loretta and Godfrey. Is there the first question should be is there one reason for all of this, or are they just all kind of, I guess, okay, you could rather put it like this. Let's draw a spectrum. On one side, we have one reason that explains all of these weirdnesses. And then on the other side, we have every single example of weirdness surrounding identity has a completely different reason. So probably the answer is somewhere in the middle of that. I would lean much more towards there being one reason. Or closer to one reason. Maybe one reason with downstream effects. So one sort of central reason, and then maybe some more distal kind of reasons as a result of that, or based on the conditions of that one reason. So when we look at the potential reasons, we can start with, okay, is this just the way the world works? Right? Like, is it just that, okay, Elden Ring's universe, it's a made-up universe. Is it possible that the rules of this universe are just that identity is not it's not an absolute law? Is this just the facts of this created universe? I don't find that especially compelling. I don't think that there's a good argument against it, except that it's not a very satisfying explanation. But I don't think you can actually argue against that. And even, especially if you take Hayeda's dialogue, So Hayeda says, all that there is came from the one great. Then came fractures and births and souls. And in the Japanese, it makes it more clear that the greater will, out of this one great was separated these things. These things were separated out of one whole. So you could say, well, maybe things are, maybe in the one great, everything is together, and then once they're just separated in a weird way, and this is the conditions of the universe. The universe is set up in such a way that identities are strange, that they don't quite work in the way that our world's identities work. And when I say identity, I'm not just referring to people. It can just be, forces, places, things. So just the identities of things, the idea that a thing is itself, that this could just be disturbed, or it could be, it could just operate on basic principles that are not the same as the basic principles of our universe. So that's one explanation. In that case, it's sort of, okay, well, that's the end of the road then, because we can't really dive any further into that. And I don't find it a very satisfying explanation. So then we look at, okay, what are the major events in the story that could, if it's not that, if there is something that screwed up the way that identity is determined, it's got to be something that happened in the story. And we can also make a presumption here that if it is something that happened later on, that it would be mentioned in some way, right? That it's not, there isn't some unheard of event that caused identity to be mixed up. Given how big this theme is and how many parts of the story it ties into, we can, I think, safely assume that whatever caused that to happen, whatever caused the world to be this way, is something mentioned in the story. So that leaves us really a few possibilities, because it would have to be a major event, it would have to affect the structure of reality itself, and so that basically means something concerning the Elden Ring. So it could be the arrival of the Elden Ring, the creation possibly, or the Elden Beast, you know, that whole can of worms, whatever is involved there. It could be changing the ring. Now, it's possible that the ring changed other times, but if we're going off of the assumption that whatever this event was, it was something important in the story, then it would have to be removing Destined Death, or it could be the shattering of the ring. Those are basically our only options. Now, the shattering of the ring, we know that Marika shattered the ring while Radagon tried to repair it, so in terms of timeline, although again, if we start questioning the flow of time itself and these basic, you know, fundamentals of how we look at a story, then this is all up for debate. But I think the reasonable conclusion is that it can't be the shattering of the ring if Radagon and Marika were already, the strangeness of their identity confusion already existed before the shattering of the ring. As far as the arrival of the Elden Ring goes, this is it's a bit more difficult to figure out what's going on there. I'm not really sure how to evaluate that as a potential candidate for what is going on with identity. But I think if we look at Destined Death, the removal of Destined Death, there is one piece of evidence that points, I think, very strongly to removing Destined Death being this primary cause for identity being messed up. And that is the existence of Roundtable Hold. So when you unleash Destined Death, Roundtable Hold burns. Roundtable Hold is a copy. It's a weird, unusual clone, memory, whatever you want to call it. It's a double of a real location. It's a double of a location that we can also find in game, right? So we know Roundtable Hold is a great example of this confusion of identity. There are two places that are the same place. One of them is outside of this world. It is very literally outside of this world. And in fact, hold on. If I bring this up, so this is the About Roundtable Hold, tutorial. The Roundtable Hold is a place where tarnished gather, guided by grace. The Roundtable Hold is located outside of this world. Okay, so it's, whatever that means, it is not, it's operating on some different principle. And so this is a very good case study of whatever is going on with identity. And what we know about it is that this double is destroyed, or you could say its existence is compromised by unleashing Destined Death. So that would point, I think, very strongly to the removal of Destined Death as being this primary cause for why identity is messed up. So that's sort of the first part of the argument. So let me read some comments now. Oh, and welcome back, Colt. Nice to see you again. Yeah, so okay, because I don't know, some people may have just joined in. So what we're talking about is the there is this one big thing happening in Elden Ring that it manifests in a lot of different ways. But the one big thing is that the identities of people, places, forces, and things are not clearly delineated. There is ambiguity about whether a person is themselves and not something else. Whether a place can be in this I mean, it's almost it's difficult to talk about, exactly what this thing is, but there's some theme about identity being confused. And so my reasoning is there has to be I won't go that far. Let's say that I think the most probable explanation for this is that there is a reason, a primary reason for it, that reason is in the story. It's not just, let's say, a thematic reason. It's not just, narrative symbolism, but there is actually mechanical reasons for it in the story. That there's one primary reason that identity is confused, and that this reason would be mentioned in the story. And given those restrictions, and given what happens to Roundtable Hold, I think that has to be the removal of Destined Death. I think that's the most parsimonious explanation for what's going on there. Although exactly what that means, we'll get into. So that's the sort of summary of what I'm saying. Um, oh, thank you, Last Protagonist. He confirmed, yes, the formless mother is vague, but it could mean formless in the way that a liquid is formless. Babushka King says, could it just be that the differing identities reflect the theme of deciding what to believe in and fight for? People often feel split between issues, like America either loving or hating the the greater will. Yeah, so that is one possibility. I mean, if you accept, for example, that your inner world, your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, that they have some kind of direct physical impact on the world. And this would be shown by the fact that you can do incantations and that you can do sorceries, that your inner state, your subjective world is not in the real world, your subjective world is mediated by action. You have to actually say something or do something in order for those inner thoughts and beliefs and emotions to manifest. In Elden Ring, and I would say as in the previous FromSoft games, that is not the case. That there is less of a discrete boundary there between the subjective world and the objective world. So if you accept that, then okay, well, what would a schizophrenic experience in a world where your subjective world is manifests magically in reality? I mean, I think just sort of to take it to the extreme, a schizophrenic might actually be two different people. And then if you were to just dial that back a bit, well, what if you were of two minds about something? You know, would you actually be two different people? So yeah, I think that is a possible way to explain it. Although I think there's more to dive into there. Skate Legend says, hey, so what do you think about Melina being the spirit of a maiden used to burn the Erd tree the first time? A maiden sent on the path to burn the tree by the Gloam-eyed Queen herself. So I think the first part of that, I would say, makes a lot of sense in that when you get the Blade of Calling, which is the blade that Melina uses, first of all, it has the quote that she says about, you know, the one who walks alongside flame shall one day meet the road of destined death. So that sort of directly connects it to her, as well as it just being that's the weapon that she actually uses. And it says this was the blade of the Kindling Maiden. And then that would tie in with Melina being burned and bodiless. So the idea would be she, for whatever reason, she burned herself. Now, why and what those conditions were, I think is a lot harder to answer. So the second part of what you said, I mean, my inclination is to say that Melina is in some way Marika. Again, referencing this whole problem with whatever identity is. Either, you know, she's the spirit of Marika, or she's Marika reborn, or a piece of Marika, or an alternate timeline of Marika, who knows what. But I think starting from the idea that she is in some way a version of Marika, I think there's strong reasons to suppose that, and then I think there's also strong reasons to suppose that Marika was also in some way the Gloam-eyed Queen. Although again, when I say now that I've laid out this idea of identity being confused, if I say person A is person B, it's not the same as saying this is an alias, right? That person A is actually just an alias of person B. Person B is the real person, and person A is just a sort of made-up identity that they're disguising themselves at, or it is literally them. It can be a lot more complicated than that. It could be that they are the same person, but also not the same person at the same time. The Lancelot du Lake, nice name. The fracture in the One Great is akin to the appearance of the first flame. It introduces duality and causes the nature of the universe to become dual. Yeah, I think that's true. John says, okay, I'm having a thought, Crunchy. What if the One Great is a collection of all probabilities in existence, within which everything is contained? But when fate crystallizes those probabilities into actuality, as in if fate actualizes things into existence, that distinguishes some possibilities from others. That's a really interesting idea. I mean, this is the problem where Elden Ring gets into such foundational metaphysical areas that it's sort of hard to evaluate it's hard to evaluate whether something could be or not, whether a theory makes sense or not, because it's sort of like, well, once you start bringing in that there are forces that govern probability versus reality, I mean, it's sort of like, okay, well, I do have to throw my hands up in the air a little bit, because I don't know how to evaluate that claim. I mean, that is a potential explanation. I wonder if it's the most parsimonious explanation. And also, I wonder if to me, that explanation doesn't have a high enough level of detail to, like, okay, let's assume that's true. how does that explain Radigan in America? Right? So I want to explain, I want to get to a point where I can explain what is going on, the actual events, the specifics of the story. So if we have a sort of broad, abstract theory, that's great, but what is its explanatory power? Mm, Saucy Pup says the one great reminds me of the Hindu Gita idea of an oversoul slash god and everything else being made of its shards in a regressive slope down the karmic ladder. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, there is definitely some, I would say, parallels with Hindu myth. I don't know how familiar Miyazaki is with Hindu mythology. I mean, Ronnie definitely looks, at least visually, like she was inspired by, I believe it's Shiva. Um, and there is this thing in the Hindu mythology of everything is sort of an avatar of everything else. That these gods, uh, gods will have children, but then the children are also themselves, and then the children, that god will also be another god, even though they're different people. So there is that weird confusion of identity. There is also Indra's net, which I think of a lot as an analogy for Elden Ring. Indra's net is this thing where there's like a million jewels in this net, and each jewel reflects every other single jewel in the net. And this giant net in Hinduism, and that really that seems like it explains, or that seems like it's a good analogy for Elden Ring's lore. Um, let's see. Yeah, what's new, boys? Makes the right point here. The question on Radigan should be, how is he America? How was he created slash born slash found? Yeah, that is the question. Mm, okay. Oh my God, you guys are making a lot of good comments here. I can't respond to everything. Oh, welcome back, Unusual Box. Glad to see that you've been enjoying the live streams. The support system made a good point about Roundtable Hold. If the Roundtable Hold seems to be existing as a sort of remembrance in the Erd Tree, its destruction having more to do with the Erd Tree's destruction than Destined Death having created Roundtable Hold. Yes, so we'll get to that in a second. I'm just reading more comments here. Sorry, I'm just still reading all your comments. I can't respond to everything because otherwise we'll get way off track, but I really appreciate these comments. Okay, All right, I'm up to date here now. So to me, what the way I'm sort of approaching this question of what's going on with identity, I feel like the most parsimonious explanation is that it has something to do with the removal of destined death, which created the Golden Order. So it's something about the Golden Order which has created this strangeness of identity. And that could be related to Rodriguez's line that immortal essence exists as spirit under the Golden Order. Now, if we assume that someone made the point that we could say that Roundtable Hold is a sort of remembrance carved into the Erd tree, let's say. So people, because Roundtable Hold burns at the same time that the Erd tree burns, people, a very popular way of addressing this is that the Roundtable Hold is inside the Erd tree. But again, I think you have to get a little specific here. Like, what? It's literally inside the Erd tree. Like, if you were to open the doors of the hub Roundtable, that you would just open up out into the Erd tree. Like, it's, I think it's clear that it's not actually there. You know, it's in some different dimension. It's outside of this world. It's not in the same world as the Erd tree is. Now, it's possible that the inside of the Erd tree is outside of this world, which is a confusing concept. You can think of it like the TARDIS in Doctor Who, that there's a whole different world inside the Erd tree than there is outside of it. But we can assume, and this is from the Future Press Books of Knowledge Volume 2, which has the interview with Miyazaki in it. The interviewer asks him about Roundtable, and Miyazaki says, its state and power originates from the Erd tree. This is why when the Erd tree burns, the Roundtable Hold burns as well. He doesn't say it's inside the Erd tree, but he says that its state and power originates from that. Now, to me, the interesting thing about this, about what he says here, is he says, as for the reason behind the Roundtable Hold's existence, he says, okay, well, we decided not to touch upon in this game, blah, blah, blah. However, it's safe to say that the Two Fingers plays a key role. And I think that's interesting because it means that the Two Fingers aren't just there. This doesn't mean that the Two Fingers were involved in creating the Roundtable Hold. It's just that they play a role in the reason for the Roundtable Hold's existence. So, to me, that suggests that there is something about the purpose of Roundtable Hold that, if we understood what was going on here, we would be able to understand something more about destined death, which would inform us about this whole question of identity. That's my sort of chain of logic there. And so if we understand Roundtable Hold and the Two Fingers, I think this is where things open up. So this is where the logic has led me so far. And now it's more into, this is the place where I'm trying to get to some firm conclusions about things. And I'm a little bit more confused because I do not understand where the Two Fingers come from and what they are. I also don't understand whether they're actually communicating with the Greater Will or America and what exactly is the difference, or if there is a difference. I don't understand why the Tarnished were let me go to this for a second. So Marika says, these are two separate echoes of Queen Marika, but they seem like they continue. So she says, "My lord and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace. I divest." Like she's taking it away. "With thine eyes dimmed, he will be driven from the lands between. You will wage war in a land afar, where you will live and die." And then she says, "Then after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed. Return to the lands between, wage war and brandish the Elden Ring. Grow strong in the face of death, warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey." So this is Marika saying that she is going to take away their grace. She is the one who removes the grace, creating the Tarnished. And because of that, because they have no grace, they will be driven from the lands between. They will leave the lands between. They will die outside of the lands between. And then, after they die, and presumably because they die, right? The idea is not, I'm just going to wait a certain amount of time, and whether you die or not, I'll give you back your grace. No, it's after your death, I will give back what I once claimed. I will give back this guidance of grace. So why? What is the reason for this? Right? I don't understand what the whole reason for the Long March, because it seems like Marika is either she's planning the whole thing, or she at least is cognizant of how things have to play out. She's predicting what's going to happen. But it does seem like she's saying that she's the one that's doing this. I'm going to take your grace away, and I'm going to give it back. So it's all about me. I mean, she's the one that's doing this. Why take away their grace? Why do they need to die outside the lands between? And why then, once they've died, does she give back the grace and bring them back? What is the point of this? What is the reason the Tarnished is here? I mean, this is actually maybe the main question of the game in terms of the plot. So that's where I'm at right now, is just trying to understand that part of it and the role of the two fingers. Because I think if we could crack that door open a little bit more, I think that it would answer, or it would at the very least, it would lend context to the question of what's going on with Roundtable Hold and why does Roundtable Hold exist, which would then lend context to what happened mechanically when Destined Death was removed, which would then, I think, help explain what is going on with identity. That's my reasoning so far. So let me read your comments now. John asks, "I had an earlier question because I was thinking about the D brothers. Do you think that the underground is the spirit realm / Helfen world?" So I would pose this in the form of a hypothesis. If in my last video I proposed this sort of tripartite model of the universe, with a world of the living, a spirit world, and then an interstice in between, and that these worlds have become merged. And if that were the case, then I think you could say that, okay, in myths, the underworld is always literally underneath, right? Like you travel down a well or you go into a cave to reach the underworld. Um, the world of the dead is usually something below you, right? You bury people, so it's always there's a relationship between the metaphysical um, structure and the physical structure in terms of verticality, right? Heaven is above, the underworld is below. So I think it's possible that the underground is, let's say, if you say, if you were to say that maybe the above ground is like, this is putting it in really simple terms. If the above ground is like 70% the world of the living and 30% the world of the dead, then the underground would be the opposite. 70% the world of the dead, 30% the world of the living. So I don't think it is the spirit world, but I think it might be closer to that. Now, that's all under the condition of, like, this is in my weird hypothesis of this inverted spirit world. But I don't know if I completely buy that. Colt says Future Press said the Tarnished were banished because Godfrey failed to win the War of the Shattering. I wonder if that's a translation thing because Godfrey was hounded from the lands between when Radagon became Elden Lord. I don't think it's possible that Godfrey could have been in the lands between when the ring was shattered. I mean, I've taken that for granted, so I'm not like thinking of an exact reason why that couldn't be the case. But I don't think the timeline would work out there. So my suspicion is that there's some weird translation thing. The support system says, so the Golden Order began around the end of the war against the Giants. Do we not have identity confusion in history before this era? Well, the problem is that we just don't have much information at all before the war with the Giants. So if I pull up my... Let me see if I can actually access it. My Miro board... and by the way, if anyone wants to take a look at this, I will put it in the chat as well. I can put it in the description. This is just a basic way to map out some things. So, before the war with the Giants, it's just all... It's all vague things. I shouldn't reveal who I am. It's all vague things. What does this say? The modern dragons are born. Placidusax is Elden Lord. Those Titan things, those giants exist. It's really unclear. So here's the war with the giants. We just don't have any information about what is going on in that previous era. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's any confusion of identity. I mean, you could argue that the way that the Fell God manifests in the Fire Giants is in some way a confusion of identity, and perhaps that is a parallel to Radagon and Marika. But I don't know. We just don't have enough information to say whether there is something going on there or not. Ace Roy says the original roundtable building could predate the Erd Tree, which I believe Tarnished Archaeologist has proposed. Um, that's possible. I mean, one of the interesting things about the roundtable is, let me bring it up. When we actually look at this roundtable, so there's all these swords that have, let me see, do I have a, there's the telescope so I can get a nice view. So, we have all these weird branch swords. I would speculate that these aren't just like normal swords that then were, I don't know, cursed or grew branches through some spell or something. I would speculate that these are made of roots or trees, these swords. In the same way that the Erd Tree Guardian sword spear is cut from a branch of the Erd Tree. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that these are cut from the Erd Tree, but that they are in fact manufactured out of some kind of tree thing. They're not made of metal. However, then we have this axe, which is also very weird, and I think it would make sense. See, because this one kind of looks like it's made of bronze almost, which wouldn't quite make as much sense with the swords being made out of wood. I don't know what's going on here, because you could argue, okay, well, the idea of the roundtable hold being there for the Tarnished, it would imply that this is Godfrey's axe, right? But that's a different axe than the one that Godfrey has. So Tarnished Archaeologist proposed that this was Godfrey's axe before he beat Sarash. I think that's possible. It does sort of explain this nicely. And also you notice that the grace is actually coming from the weapons, which could tie into the way that the Erd Tree produces grace. Like, these weapons are also either from cut from the Erd Tree or made up of a similar type of tree material that the Erd Tree is made from. You know, maybe cut from the Crucible or who knows what. And that's why they produce this grace. I think that's a possibility. The support system says, for instance, if the round... Oh, wait, what was this? Oh, yeah. For instance, if the roundtable hold exists to trap the two fingers, that would be them playing a role. I think that's a possibility. I think that's a genuine possibility. So one of the things that I was thinking about is, I wonder if this two fingers... This is the only surviving two fingers besides Ronnie's. And it's like very decrepit. But this is the only one that's not dead, right? I mean, I'm not forgetting one, am I? So, is it possible that America created this fake roundtable hold to, like, okay, let's imagine things this way, and I'm just sort of throwing things at the wall here, but imagine that America created a roundtable hold within the Erd Tree that's like a memory of roundtable hold that she is controlling. It's some extra like pocket dimension that she created, and that she literally put the two fingers in here so that she could act as if she was the greater will. In other words, that the two fingers were receiving the guidance of America and not the greater will. So she could like supplant their source of information. That that is a possibility I'm considering, although it still sort of doesn't explain a lot of things. Saucy Pup asks, is the Roundtable Hold sort of like a structural version of the Everjail Prisoners slash Golden Shade of Godfrey? The thing with the Everjail that I think is relevant is that it is a pitch black sky outside and there is no Erd tree visible. So I don't know what to make of that, except that wherever you are when you're in an Everjail, it is not governed by the Erd tree. Whether that means like a different time or dimension or something like this, I don't know. The last protagonist says, remember how I said the rolled crone says burning the tree will unleash destined death? There may be corroboration in the seedbed curse, which says it prevents death from returning to it in Japanese. Death may actually go inside the Erd tree, and the Erd tree may seal it, but I don't know. Let me look up that, what is it exactly? How do I find that? Here we go. The burning of the Erd tree is the first cardinal sin. Doing so will unbind destined death and slay the world itself. So I don't really know how I can substantiate this idea, but I do have this idea that like, okay, when you have the Elden Ring inside you, you are a god. Right? Vessel of the Elden Ring. What is it? Vessel of its vision, something? Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision. So, if you're God, then it's sort of like you are sort of carrying the rules of reality within you. So I'm wondering if that is just a reality. Like, if there were another Elden Ring and someone else had it within them, that they would have their own reality. I'm not really sure how to say this, but like, yeah, I guess it would be like if you had a sort of vision for the world, like, oh, if I ran the world, this is how I'd do it. Except in Elden Ring, that's real because of the Elden Ring. So if you change that, then reality changes, and maybe destined death is a maybe it's just part of those rules that each dream, each reality has to end at some point. That it can't sustain itself forever. I don't know. It's a kind of I'd have to think about what exactly I'm actually trying to say there. Um, so John says the immediate thought I have is that this is some way of sending them off the grid by severing them from the greater will somehow. I assume referring to the tarnished. Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like, I mean, it seems like there's something mechanical happening with grace and existing in the lands between and death that, like, the tarnished need to leave. It's almost as if that you need to not have grace in order to leave the lands between, and you need to have grace to return to the lands between. So the idea would be she needs them to die, and they can't do that while they're in the lands between. Which would also, by the way, I think potentially be evidence for, because there's another question here, which is when was Destined Death removed? When did the Golden Order start? That could potentially be evidence that Destined Death was removed before even Radigan became Elden Lord. Because he only became Elden Lord when Godfrey was hounded from the lands between. So if there was a reason that they couldn't die while they were here, I don't know, because it's confusing. There is that Miyazaki interview where he makes a distinction between the immortality granted by grace and the immortality of the demigods stemming from having their fated deaths removed. Last protagonist says, I think it's possible the Erd Tree is a death cult and gets stronger by absorbing the souls of the dead, so America sending them out to nuke the land of its residents would force them into the Order. Huh. I definitely agree with the first part. I'm actually not entirely sure what you mean. Like, are you saying that it's essentially like expansion, that she wants to bring in, like, okay, if you don't have grace, then for whatever reason, when you kill people outside the lands of between, you're going to absorb the souls of those people that you killed, and we need extra souls, so if you bring them back into the lands between, now the lands between has more juice. Is that the idea? I maybe elaborate on that a little. Um, oops, sorry. I'm just reading some of these comments. Oh, and howdy, howdy, by the way. Um, yeah, let me remember to say something about America's motivations here. So, oh, and John asks whether did you ask me about Godfrey potentially being a dragon who turned into a human like Lansix? Let me say something about that. Let me just quickly get to a couple. Let me just try to catch up to the comments here. Uh, oh, the support system makes a good comment about potentially the black knives killing all the other two fingers. I guess there is a question perhaps there's a question as to why the other two fingers are dead, the ones on the Divine Towers. Hmm. Also, we see thorn tree swords impaling the corpses of the giants. Does it make any sense to think before conquering the Forge of the Giants, Crucible Knights couldn't forge weapons, only grow them? Yeah, that's an interesting idea, because smithing was invented by giants, and it was once considered divine. There perhaps was, I mean, I don't know where that takes you exactly, but the idea that weapons, swords, could be made out of tree stuff and you're not using metal, perhaps that ties in with the whole thing with the ancestral followers, how they eschew metal. Sorry, I'm just reading some of these comments. You guys have a lot of good points here. Okay, so let me pick up on two things here. So first of all, I have to decide which one of these is less of a rabbit hole to go down. So I think America's motivations. The one thing that we know for sure, as much as we know for sure anything about America, is we know that she shattered the Elden Ring, and we know, by the way, we know that that wasn't Radigan. Whereas you could argue with a lot of other of the things that America says and does, it's possible that it was actually Radigan acting as America, because we don't know exactly how that relationship works. So, but we know for sure that America shattered the ring and that Radigan tried to repair it. So, whatever her motivations are, it has to do with shattering the ring. Now, we don't know. I would bring in this ambiguity about whether Radigan is actually acting as America in some capacity for some of the events that we have assumed are America. But Hugh was cursed, instructed, whatever, to craft a weapon to slay a god. So, what exactly is that? Um, is if that were America, is the idea that, and it seems to be tied with the fact that Yuga's in the Round Table, and the Round Table exists for the Tarnished. So, did the Tarnish, did the Tarnished, were they supposed to slay a god? And in which case, does that mean America? Like, is she actually looking for a way to die? Or is she looking for a way to kill Radigan or the Elden Beast? Or is it Radigan disguising himself as Marika, or, acting as Marika, uh, trying to get a Tarnished to kill Marika? So that's a bit confusing. And I mean, it's not clear what, like, okay, what's the point? Why would you want to do any of that? Oh, the other thing I wanted to pick up on was where Godfrey comes from. So, um, here's a couple things that I will just point out, and I'm not going to say that there is any kind of like cohesive theory here, or if there is a theory, it's not well supported. But I'll just make some observations here regarding Horalu. So, first of all, you have the Badlands and the Highlands, and they seem to be the same culture. The Highlands axe, and let me see, what is it called? Where does it mention the Badlands? Oh, I think because if you start as the like barbarian, uh, you have the Highlands axe, I think, and it's clearly the same culture based on the way that the axe looks. I could probably find that. So, axes. Where are the axes? So there's the... Why is it not working? Oh, I need to turn it on. So there's the Highland axe. Make that bigger a little bit. And let's see, where's the other axe? And here's the great axe. Oops. No, that's not what I meant to do. I meant to do this. Just center that a little bit. And if we look up the description, so the great axe is recognized as the weapon of choice of Badland chieftains, and then there's the Highland axe. Yeah. Oh, yes, and the Highland axe, so we have a reference to the rhymed Roa found in frigid highlands. So the highlands are somewhere cold. And this is where Godfrey presumably comes from. If we accept that the highlands and the Badlands are the same place or parts of the same place, the implication could be that Godfrey came from the mountaintops of the giants. Now, in further support of this, we have the Kaiden sellswords, and their armor looks very similar to oh boy, do I have it here? I think there's a lot more going on with the Kaiden sellswords than meets the eye. But I would have to sort of gather some materials here to kind of make all the connections. So I can't even find their armor right now. But let's just say for the moment that it's possible Godfrey came from... the Badlands and the Highlands are the mountaintops of the giants, and that this is where Horalu came from, and that Hoarfrost Stomp is a stomp that produces ice, and it's called Hoarfrost, and Godfrey also uses a stomp. He also roars, which is something that beasts do, but also giants and trolls. And Godfrey is exceptionally large. I don't know where any of that takes you, but the idea that Godfrey could be potentially a giant, I think, is not a remote possibility. So now here's the other part of that. If you want to get really crazy, um, the other part of it is Lansix took human form, and Lansix is a um, let's say normal-sized ancient dragon. Now you have Grand Sax, who is way bigger, and you also have this general sense of things being bigger in the past. Like there's this weird thing with the division angle where everything seems to get smaller as it goes on. And you have these giant like the crows and dogs which are in the mountaintops and also Kaled. Um, they're like huge. You have the giants. So you have the fire giants, and then there's sort of their cousins, the trolls. They're smaller. Then you have these titans, which are way in the past, presumably. Um, you have the modern dragons are smaller than the ancient dragons, and then you have Grand Sax. So here's the question: if a dragon can take human form, Lanciax becomes like a human. So what would happen if Grand Sax decided to take human form? Like, would he also just be a human, or would he be giant sized? So then, here's the crazy part: is everything just a dragon? Is that where everything comes from? Because we also have that stuff about the crucible, that the fact that humans used to grow, these weird crucible draconic aspects on themselves. Is it possible that the timeline goes like initially everything was dragons, and then dragons somehow became giants by splitting off beast parts of themselves, and then giants like over time divided and divided until they became human sized, and maybe humans are not actually a different species, but they're just the pygmies in relation to giants. um I'm not going to say any of this is true, but maybe that's a potential explanation. I don't know. I don't. What do you make of that? Oh yeah, thank you, Matthew Sargent, and welcome back to the stream. I believe you've been here before. Godric calls the grafted dragon a true-born heir and thy kindred, possibly implying some sort of relationship between the golden lineage and the drakes. Um, yeah. I mean, I. So let me look at that line again. Uh, Mighty dragon, thou art a true-born heir. As if to say that based on your lineage, because you're a dragon, you are supposed to be the ruler, which would imply that humans being royalty has supplanted the dragons in some way. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Kindred. So, okay, is this metaphorical? Well, this is Miyazaki. He says things that sound like metaphor, and they're usually literal. So, And then there's all the stuff with Godwyn, like Godwyn establishing a peace with the dragons. Why were the dragons fighting them in the first place? I don't know. I This idea that like things are kind of everything is mixed together and then you split them apart, and I think with that idea is like when you split them apart, you literally have less material. Like things become smaller. The bits that you split off become smaller. There's also like the vulgar militia, like they're really tiny now. I don't know. The support system says, wait, ancient dragons split into drakes and giants. Yeah, maybe? Like, I don't know. Yeah, Solway at Coagula. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's not like a theory that I can really, like, I can't confidently say, hey, there's a good reason to believe this. It just kind of makes sense. Oh, that just reminded me to look up the dung eater thing. What was um what was last protagonist saying about that? It was a while ago. I forgot to look that up. Seedbed curse. That was it. The dung eater cultivates the seedbed curse on corpses. By doing so, he prevents dead souls returning to the Erd tree, leaving them forever cursed. Yeah. The caca consumer. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the thing with, like, I don't know, if we look at Godfrey, I wonder if I can pull up some things. So, like, the weird thing about Godfrey is if we look at, wait, hold on, I want to, I want to find the second phase cutscene. So,
That will be all.
let me find it. Hold on one second. So let me put this up here. Okay, so this cutscene is incredibly weird. Like, Sarosh, he starts becoming physical,
That will be all.
and then Godfrey's like, no, don't do that.
It's me good service,
And then he kills him.
Siraj.
And then, here's the weirdest part. Here, Sarosh's claw. And it moves with Horalu's hand. Right? Like, clearly the idea is that, I don't know, that he's, like, connected to it
I've
somehow.
given thee courtesy enough.
I just don't understand any of this. Like, why? Okay, I can understand Sarosh, like, wants to join the battle. But, like, okay, so he just has the power to become physical? So where was he before? And then, like, why does Godfrey kill him? And one reading of that would be, like, Sarosh is absorbed by Horalu, and that Horalu is actually the combination of Godfrey and Serash, and that maybe Serash is the beastly part of Godfrey. Like maybe in order to become Lord, Godfrey had to become civilized, and in order to become civilized, he had to separate the beastly part out of him. Like that would sort of make sense, except that Serash seems to be like a character. He's not just like Godfrey. Like he's the Lord of Beasts. There's all this stuff with like Godfrey, like statues in front of a lion statues that suggest that like Serash was doing his own thing before Godfrey came around. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. Matthew Sargent asks, could Serash be Godfrey's immortal essence, existing as spirit under the Golden Order? Does this have something to do with the identity thing you were talking about? Yeah, I don't know, because it there is there's no direct evidence that supports Serash existing before Godfrey took him on his back. Like there's no item description. But and that would seem to like, okay, well then a nice way to rectify what's going on in the cutscene and how he like sort of absorbs Serash. A nice way to explain that is that like Serash is the Horalu part of Godfrey. That he's the beastly part that was separated out, and that's how Godfrey became Godfrey. That's how Horalu was a beastly man, and he separated out the beast part of himself, and that's why he was able to become Godfrey, this like chill lord guy. But then there's all this stuff like the statues that suggest. Maybe I can find one actually. I think it's the throne room that suggests that like Serash was important before. Here's an idea. You know how Godfrey is first Elden Lord and Placidusax was Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree? What if Godfrey is a part of Placidusax?
What a pathetic excuse for a lord you were. Craven to the bone. Pushing me.
So here's Godfrey's statue. You know, I'm not actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. I don't know if those might be part of the same thing. I'll have to look at, because I think Tarnished Archaeologist made a good case for Sarah, like Godfrey defeating Serash. But I wonder how strong that case actually is. Lancelot du Lake says, Serash channels Godfrey's Jungian shadow. He roars while Godfrey stays stoic, as is proper for a king. Without Serash, Godfrey is the one who roars. Well, yeah. I mean, what I'm sort of wondering is, like, is Serash just thematically acting as the Jungian shadow? Or is he literally Horalu's shadow side? Like, Horalu is the integrated guy, and then he separates his shadow side. Because then it kind of makes sense with, like, okay, is Malekith Marika's Like, is Malekith part of America? Or was he part of America? Was he her shadow side? Like the idea of this like beastly shadow side, right? Because the shadow side is, it's the dark part. It's the part that wants, um, it's like, it's the id, you know, it's the thing that wants, uh, gratification, and it wants to, it doesn't have any higher order, literally higher order, like governance going on. It's just desires, it's lust, it's violence. You know, that's the shadow side. Um, but then it's kind of weird. Like if Blythe part of Ronnie? Like, but okay. But here's the other part of it. Okay, if shadowbound beasts are like a way of purifying oneself, right? Because you think of it like alchemically, you are uh not diluting. What is it? You're separating out the different components of a mixture. So like, in order to become divine, you have to be pure, and so you eliminate the impurities by taking out this shadow beastly part and being born again as a more divine, pure being. And that's why Empyreans have wolf shadows. They have these beasts because you have to get rid of the beast nature. But of course, they're still metaphysically tied, so there's some relationship there. And then maybe that explains Mikla and Melania. Like, they don't exactly have beasts because they were born from a single god. So they're already coming from divine essence, let's say. Like, they're already more divine than your average person. So they don't need to separate out a beast, but they sort of separate out into two cursed beings. Oh yeah, Unusual Box points out, Blythe says, no, I'm a part of her very being. Huh. Yeah, word for word. I don't know. And I think, I mean, I don't know, it's weird because it does seem like there's this civilization of beastmen. But then if you think about it, like Farum Azula, the whole city is a mausoleum, right? It's just about burial of the dead. So what if the idea is everybody starts out beastly, and then you get reborn purified of that beastliness? I don't know. I'm just kind of like, I'm struggling to make sense of it. But I think this whole thing with shadows, the shadow side being this beastly thing, that seems really important. Unusual Box asks, did it change Ronnie when he died? Um, no, but there's a lot of other things that might be relevant there because Ronnie already has eliminated her body. So she's eliminated her body, and she's in the doll, but then there's also like the tiny doll. And when you fight the baleful shadow, that's a weird one because it does seem like it is Blythe. Like it's the you know, it's the taller model. It's not like a person dressed up as Blythe, right? It's not an NPC dressed up as Blythe. Like, it's the size of Blythe. Um, and once you kill that one, Ronnie says, let me look at what she says. Um, she says something about no, what did she say? Um, yeah. This is farewell, my dear. Tell Blythe and E.G. I love them. As if she's actually dying. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Marika doesn't change when you kill Malekith? Are you sure about that? Because when you kill Malekith, the Erd Tree burns, and I mean, you could say that Marika is released from her crucifixion and turns into Radigan. And also, okay, let's stay on the crazy train. Radigan is called a Leal Hound. And like in the Japanese, it's literally like a loyal dog. Inu. He's a dog. Also, when you kill Blythe, isn't Ronnie sitting dead beneath her two fingers at that point? Yeah, actually, so I'm not remembering the exact sequence there. So is it you kill Blythe? Mm, yeah, I don't think you have to. Right, you never have to kill Blythe. Right, you because it's after you do something in Ronnie's. I think it's after you sort of revive her with the ring. I think that's it, and you get the Moonlight Greatsword. That he is chilling around her rise. Billiam632 says Blythe is said to be a childhood friend of Ronnie's. He seems to be a human posing as a wolf. No, so there's, I mean, well, I don't know. I shouldn't say definitively anything, but the wolf mask that you get from Seluvis's rise is not Blythe. Like, Blythe is a wolf man. There was an assassin who dressed up as Blythe by putting on a wolf mask, but that is not Blythe. Oh, it's after the shadow. So Blythe appears there after you kill the baleful shadow. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know. It's there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions. And then I'm just to change tack a little bit, like the two fingers, I just really don't understand the two fingers at all. Like, I do not get what is going on here. Because they're the ones that they're the ones that give they're the ones that choose Empyreans and give Empyreans shadows, right? So like, what are these guys? Why do they have weird hairs? I mean, presumably, like, they looked better in the past. Now they're like decrepit, which could be a an effect of the shattering of the ring, but I wonder if it's something even earlier. Modeling, it's not clear. I mean, it's sort of like, it looks sort of like flesh that is then kind of getting all rotten and nasty. But what's the color doing there? Some weird rendering problems. That looks like flesh. It looks like there's blood there. But then the ones on top of the Divine Towers are like, they look like they're made of wood. Let's see, do I have one activated? Oh wait, no, this one doesn't have 2 fingers. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the 2 fingers, like, okay, they have to come from somewhere. Let me see. Oh, maybe at the top. Here we go. There would be one here. They have to come from somewhere. So whether that's just like, okay, there's some, this is just some weird creature that exists in this universe, or they came from space, or they were separated from something bigger. I mean, clearly, the concept of them being, you know, 2 and 3 fingers from the same hand. I know Zuli did a video that, like, proves, let's say, that they're not part of the same hand. I don't see how you could have 2 and 3 fingers in a game and not have that be part of a 5 fingers. It is, oh yeah, Saucy Pup mentions Ronnie's finger, like, they look really weird. They've got, like, extra joints, and I don't understand what's going on there either. I think Tarnished Archaeologist's, his explanation of the sort of historical context of the sign of the 2 and 3 fingers being part of these religious disputes, I think is probably the part of the inspiration, but that doesn't actually address what is going on mechanically here. Like, that's fine, that can be the inspiration. That doesn't say what these things are. So this is really weird. Because that looks like wood, I would say. Possibly some metal. It kind of looks a little bit like Placidusax's skin. How he has that actually, let me see if I can find a picture of that. Is there a good picture here? I don't know if you can clearly see. No, these aren't good. Oh, I gotta actually put this on the stream. Hold on. So where's a clear example of this? Oh, come on, where's like an HD picture? Is no one taking a good picture of Placidusax? These all suck. You can kind of tell here. So you can see how he's got this like gray outer layer that's completely gold underneath. And that I would say is a similar idea to what's going on here. Although this is clearly not like, maybe this is copper, but it looks more like it's wood. And so there's a relationship, again, kind of going back to like those tree swords in the Round Table Hole. Like there's a relationship between wood and metals. So maybe this is metal, maybe this is gold without life in it, and so it's wood now? I don't know. But then it's also flesh. So yeah, I have no idea what's going on here. But this really looks like it's made of wood. If I like, that looks like bark. But it clearly parallels Placidusax. If anyone could make a game where 2 plus 3 doesn't equal 5, it would be Miyazaki. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I don't know. They're just so weird. And I don't really understand the... I don't really understand the relationship between the Two Fingers, the Greater Will, and Marika. Because it seems like Marika is constrained. Like, Marika was an Empyrean, right? So, let me bring up... where is it? So Malekith was a shadowbound beast given to his Empyrean. So Marika was an Empyrean. Does that mean she was chosen by fingers? So, like, have... What comes first? There's like a chicken and egg thing. Like, what exactly do the Two Fingers do in the grand scheme of things? Will the Three Fingers act in service to the frenzied flame? Yeah. So the two do so for the greater will. It means the fingers can detect them, I think, or maybe they simply choose / anoint. Well, yeah, that's also a weird one, because Ronnie says that Melania and Mikla were chosen by their own two fingers, but the remembrance of Melania says that they're Empyreans sort of by birth. So... John says, I feel like we could maybe figure some things out by thinking about the finger readers, because they're needed to figure out what the fingers are even saying, and they're massacred in the lead-up area to Marika's chamber. Yeah, which also has a black knife assassin there. I just don't really understand them, because I don't get this whole plan with the Tarnished, where Marika's like, I'm going to take your grace, you're going to go outside the lands between, you're going to die, and then I'm going to give you back your grace, you're going to come back, and then you're going to become Elden Lord. Like, why does that... Why? Why do you want to do that? And is that something that the fingers, like, is that plan coming from the Greater Will? Is that the Greater Will saying that? Because it almost seems like the Greater Will is responding. Like, Marika predicts, she knows that once the demigods don't... None of the demigods become a lord, she knows in advance, before she even sends the Tarnished away, before Radagon becomes Elden Lord, she knows that the demigods are not going to become Elden Lord, and that as a result of that, the Greater Will is going to bless the Tarnished with grace and try to get them to become Elden Lord. Like, that's what it seems like. So seems like she's running her own game, and the Greater Will's just kind of another pawn in that game almost. Do the finger readers have two sets of arms, or am I tripping? No, they do not. I thought that they did for a long time, and I was trying to connect them to the wraith colors, but they just have a really weird posture that makes it look like they just have two arms. But that's another example of the identity thing, by the way, is the wraith colors and the revenants, because these are not grafted beings. This is different than the grafted scions, but it's almost like there's multiple people existing in the same body, which would kind of be like maybe the D twins. I mean, the sort of obvious reading of, if you assume that the removal of destined death is the reason that identity is messed up, one way to read that would be, well, destined death is a future state. So if you take away that future state, but you don't destroy it, right? Because, like, the Rune of Death isn't destroyed, it's just removed from the Elden Ring. So if the Elden Ring governs reality, but the fated death of people, demigods, gods, whatever, is removed from it, but still has power, then maybe you have two timelines running simultaneously. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it here because I'm getting a little sleepy and I need to eat something. I need brain food. So I'm glad that we solved every single problem in Elden Ring. Anyway, let's see. Let me post this again in the chat. It should be in the video description. So this is a document. I'm gonna make more notes in here just for my next video, and I really want to try and nail down what's going on with the Tarnished, because I think I'll just sort of repeat myself here. I think if we understand why the Tarnished became Tarnished, why this plan of America, why that was the plan, then we understand something about Round Table Hold and what was going on there in the Two Fingers role. And if we understand that, we understand something about Destined Death. Oh, thank you for the super chat, Ayn Rand Paul Ryan. Thank you. I think if we understand Destined Death, that is the key to unlocking this big theme of identity. So that's the direction that I'm going to be moving in and trying to figure out that stuff, trying to figure out the whole deal with grace and death. And I would love to get, if you guys have extra comments, or if I missed so many in this stream, so if you really want me to see something, then leave a comment on the stream and I can easily read it then. Or you can make notes. Everybody is free to make notes in the document. And this is a while ago, but I'll just post the Miro board again. for anybody who wants to look at it. So I would love some help. Yep, so I think I'll leave it there. And thank you guys for stopping by. Always love chatting with you. I hope that the stream worked well with this new setup. So that's it for today. Take care.